Yes. Sorry. All right. I had emails.
Okay, perfect. So here.
Okay.
And she.
Okay. Is he sitting here?
Sure.
I'm married Pat O'Brien.
Mark McHugh.
Oh, Mark, yeah.
How are you?
Who did I just, on your board?
You just
Dan.
met Dan.
Yeah.
Yeah. I have half an email written to Sister Rosemary.
Oh, okay.
Needs to get out. Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, I usually do go, but
Oh, do you? Yeah.
I couldn't. I had something last
Yeah.
night, and
Yeah.
my choice was drive in, get there around 11, and
Mm-hmm. Miss everything. Yeah. I'm in charge of all residential and programs.
well, good.
So. Been there for
That's
quite
a lot.
while. It's a lot. But, it's all the other people that do other work. So.
Yeah. Heavens to Betsy, I can't do a cup of coffee.
Do they do this meeting on it too? I mean, it sounds like there's this meeting.
Yeah, the large group meeting, which that's all over to the left that you can't see is where almost everybody sits.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and then the
And this meeting?
yeah, there's usually a phone call. Oh, good, I'm right back. Yeah, there's usually a phone dial-in number.
Yeah.
Yes. Mention that. I'm gonna ask Katie.
Everybody gets to decide. As sad as that is to say.
Okay.
After they break up in here.
Yeah. Priscilla right by us on S.
Yes.
Okay. That's great. Yeah. IARF, is it for you guys?
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess if you go in there and, and we're on the south side and on the north side.
Fairly new, did you say, or for
Yeah,
2 years or something?
I don't get to come out anymore because I moved that.
Okay.
Yeah, Jen, you get it.
Oh, okay, good. And what were you doing before?
For that, I was at One Hope.
Oh, okay.
Other programs and really try.
Was that on the south side too, or? Oh,
Big campus on Lake Villa. We did our residential treatment. In our
great. I bet they're really being hurt now.
it's gotten better.
Yeah.
But they changed the eligibility of the clinic. But it was right. And it was in time. This September thing.
They're all like, maybe have like one or two kids.
So that was something to a statement, which is better than not where it used to be.
And that's all I got. Somebody else.
It's awful.
Oh my God. And
You know, you see what LSSI and you know, like, I don't know. Don't the politics to of England.
Right.
It's not right.
Right. It's no, they're just clueless, absolutely, about who they're serving. They think they're serving the business. Yeah, I'm hoping his State of the Union's on the radio. So. Go, do you stay overnight? Office down there. Is it?
So it's right off 6th, excuse me, on 6th, right off of, so, you know, where the Hilton and the Abraham Lincoln are?
Yeah. I was going to go to, I don't know, the December meeting. I didn't go.
Oh, yeah.
Just, it's a tough road when it snows. We had a South home, 47 California. That's what started that skilled, basically skilled. And we closed that in 2005, and we did build replacement. And it's at center by the 606. Yeah, I live in Ukraine.
Okay.
Yeah,
You just step in and see it.
yeah.
Fine arts program is really.
Of everything that you guys are doing, sings your praises very highly.
Yeah, good.
Because if someone is here and you wanted to see it, and like whether learn from us or bring stuff back, I don't know, but just have a. With CMS, the new regs that are coming out.
I think that's the big question, right? And so, one is, yeah, the alignment with but the other part is, okay, what are we going to look
Why are you sending all these people to
Yeah.
So, we're going to, upcoming fiscal year, next fiscal year, we're gonna go this. That just kind of helps staff learn a little bit more about what. But we're able to use that. We'll be able to use that. And
Those are like post-family syllabus, right? Are they?
have right now in the pipeline. It is a good amount of word of mouth, which also had a not
What's talking?
yeah, this is the way it is. This is
Are you warming up? Or you...
Yeah, no, I'm
Okay.
fine.
What I meant is we
Hearing.
Yeah, that's really nice. Really nice.
Jennifer, do you want to sit here or here? Either way.
I'll sit.
Yeah, I'll sit where you don't sit. Where do you want to sit?
I'll sit sit there. I think this is Janet's stuff.
Good morning. I guess.
I just never seen that big of a temperature difference in a room this size. It must be under the vents.
They must have air blowing right there, not down there. But there's a vent there.
Which is good. I was starting to get kind of warm back there,
I was
so
too.
I'm not complaining. Yeah, no, I didn't get a kick when people were like, yeah, there's talking points of the speech. What's it going to say? What's it going to say? Like, here, it's a speech.
It's not going to matter.
Exactly.
He gives it.
Yeah, it's just another chain of events.
Although I don't know if you guys noticed, but Ken Duncan will be providing his thoughts on the state of the state at 3 o'clock.
Oh, no, I hadn't heard that.
Yeah, so I mean, clear your schedule.
I actually would like to.
Well, I'm sure, yeah, for the entertainment value, yeah.
But I can't.
It's theater. It's theater. You know, bring your popcorn and your soda pop and your.
Talking about the math appropriation.
Yeah.
And
I think the way it was
Higher ed
phrased in
does not include
the Tasha
universal going away.
thing was his response to the state. Like,
So it has
kind of
like when they do.
yeah, I don't know. Like,
One with
Only the biggest creators.
Yeah, exactly.
maybe he's just
So
gonna
it's
feel
just-
questions. You better have something prepared to say, because I don't think people will have many questions.
Well, I think it's going to not very, maybe very direct questions.
Yes.
Nature. He's not making a
I
lot
think all
of
the questions. I don't think if I were
Do you want the middle?
be about how do you feel about this and that absolute world now, because that was
Okay, on the left.
You're on the right, aren't you?
Well, as I was
How are you?
just facing you.
Oh,
Now,
yeah.
now I actually.
Is that your good side? Is that your side? Both sides.
I can't imagine.
Thanks.
Somebody probably whispering in his ear, that's a good idea.
Well, somebody's been whispering in his ear that there are a lot of things that are good ideas that aren't exactly. So, you know, that's not
That's a fair point. Fair point. You're right.
Everybody good to go?
So,
Good morning, everybody. I think we're going to go ahead and get
I
started.
feel like looking at the picture there, I have a spotlight on my dome. Look at that. I look like I don't even have hair. There.
Don't look.
I know. I should.
Does that red light mean something?
It means it's on. It means they can hear you in Denmark.
Denmark, all right. I don't speak Denmark. I'm not, but
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the January meeting of the membership, our first of the year. And certainly a day that comes with great potential, and I'm sure some anxiety as we prepare to hear what the governor will say in his State of the State address later today. And we sent the information out, but for anyone who's interested in viewing it without going to the Capitol, we will be live streaming it up where the DD committee is meeting. So you can stay and if you would like, watch it from there. Or you can make your way to the Capitol for the real deal. Although I think there is some very limited seating that goes along with that. In preparation for that, and also in preparation for us beginning our year and our work towards our policy and legislative agenda, we have a great panel here today to explore with you the environment that we find ourselves in, and also kind of their best, I don't want to say guesses, I guess I want to say their best wisdom from being in the positions that they are working in this environment day in and day out. So they'll be sharing some insights, and we have some beginning discussion that we'll want them to address, but we also want you to ask your questions as time permits at the end of that. Before we get started, though, I just want to acknowledge a couple of things that are going on in the association, which I'm hopeful that you are all well aware of by the communications that have been coming from staff. But this year, given everything that is happening, both in terms of uncertainties, challenges, and certainly opportunities, we really have focused back on the 4 core areas where we provide member benefit. And that is in the area of developing strong and affecting good policy decisions at the state level, working with the legislature to enact legislation, both appropriation-wise and substantive-wise, that can impact the delivery of supports that you all provide. A key component this year will be education. We have you received a flyer when you came in today about some opportunities that we have coming up, and we'll continue those throughout the year, both in the way of informational webinars, but also some key substantive information, which may take the form of on-site training, which is not something we've done in a while. But a lot of these issues that are coming forward are just too involved and too impactful on the future of services to have those be done in a 1-hour webinar. And then our last area that we engage our members is in the area of community. And it's so important for all of us to continue talking not only as you feeding information to the association and us feeding it to you, but to come together in forums like this where we have the benefit of, how are you approaching this and what is happening in your agency and what have you had to do in some of the unfortunate circumstances that you all are faced with given the budget impasse. So we'll be encouraging that and giving opportunities for that to happen. I want to acknowledge our GR committee, our grassroots committee, and the team leaders that are involved in that. This, as you will hear, will be a challenge for us to impact decisions that are made at the Capitol. But the team leaders in each of the 10 areas of the state that are providing outreach and providing information to all of you in the times when you're together, I think will be critically important as we go forward and try to impress our positions and our concerns with members of the General Assembly. So in just 1 year, those team leaders have gelled into some amazing leaders around the state. And we are so thankful that we have them working with us as we advance our policy and particularly our legislative agenda. And if you haven't seen those policy and legislative agendas, let me just kind of hit some high points. We're focusing legislatively on 2 key areas. One is the DSP wage crisis, which I don't believe there is anyone in this room that has not been impacted by the inability to hire and retain qualified staff in your support positions. And the impact that has not only on the quality of life of the individuals, but the stress levels of your staff and certainly the challenges of the CEOs to try to manage through that. One of our intentions was to engage unusual partners. And yesterday in a meeting of Comptroller Munger's nonprofit advisory council, she asked for, what are some trends that are happening? And our board chair, Carl Lamel, brought up the wage crisis, and it was echoed by Kim Zoller and Sam Tenuto from Pioneer Center, who are all on that group, talking about this. And she is willing to use the megaphone of her office to help elevate the level of discussion about that. And so we'll be providing her with some different information. But that's part of the strategy, is to engage in different ways and with different voices. So that will be one key priority that we're focused on. Another is to address the mental health crisis in the state of Illinois, and the fact that that safety net system has been defunded over the last decade to the point now where with the uncertainty of whether or not grants will be funded in the current fiscal year or going forward, it is almost impossible for a community mental health center and those that provide behavioral health services to maintain some of the key supports that have been so vital to people in their recovery. And so we have a bill that will have a series of components that we believe will address some of those concerns. And both of these will be large boulders that we will be rolling up a hill. But we're ready. I mean, I send my staff to the gym every day at lunch and twice on Tuesdays. So we're prepared. You notice I said I send my staff. I am prepared. And then we have some other key pieces of legislation, such as the personal needs allowance, which, as you know, was so unfortunately withdrawn by the administration in terms of something that they did last year. So we'll keep you fully informed. Our GR leaders will keep you fully engaged. And we really need for you to, as organizations and as staff and engaging your parents and engaging your self-advocacy groups as we go through all of this. So, that's something that's very, very important to us. So with that, let me move actually to the discussion today. And first of all, introduce the panel, which I think many of you know, but for those of you who don't, this is a group of individuals and their colleagues, some of who are not able to be here, that IARF, through the investment of the board of directors and the commitment of the board of directors, has provided to the association so that every decision that we make and every door that we open, we're headed in the right direction and we have access to the right people. And so I feel very fortunate, as I know our staff does and your board of directors does, to know that these people are pulling in the same direction that we are. So for those of you who have not met these individuals, directly to my left but to your right is Rob Huey and Jennifer Morrison, and they are part of Taylor Huey, who we have had many times, but who are also at our meetings of the membership, but are also a great resource to the board of directors on a regular basis. And next to Jennifer, we have Matt Werner from M. Werner Consulting. And Matt has been a part of our latest efforts to try and look at ways to protect the GRF dollars that are so vulnerable, particularly in our mental health system, but not just exclusively in that regard, but looking at ways that we can either Medicaid those or use other strategies, funding strategies, to make sure that that the monies remain in the system. Every penny is so important. And next to Matt is Mike Grady with Strategic Advocacy Group. And Mike has been working with the GR committee on messaging, not only for our current advocacy efforts, but also in looking at the framing of our policy agenda and how it is presented and maximizing, hopefully, the information that we have in a way that doesn't overwhelm people, but grabs their attention and really engages them, and hopefully every compassionate bone they have in their body. But certainly beyond the PR aspect of it, Mike has a lot of experience in developing and actually running campaigns that have resulted in outcomes. Smoke-Free Illinois was a campaign that he organized and actually shepherded through the process. So we have, like I said, we have a very august, though I've never really quite understood what that word meant, as opposed to July group of people.
Makes us sound kind of old if you ask me. I don't know.
Something about, the dog days of summer or whatever. But what we wanted to talk with them about and what we wanted to hear from them about is, of course, the environment that we find ourselves in, and so that you would have their perspective as you begin to think through these things as well as us. And so I guess the first question that I would pose is, from our perspective, and I believe from many others, the FY16 budget is not complete. Obviously, there isn't one. But here we are now, kind of on the where we should normally be talking about the coming fiscal year. And so from the other thing that we've heard on many occasions from Secretary-designate Demas is that there is a plan within the department and within the governor's office of that may involve not even having an FY16 budget, but going directly into an FY17 budget and flowing through that process. I, in all my years, have never seen that. I don't know how that works. I don't know if that's constitutional or legal or, what would have to be done. But I would be interested in hearing your perspective about how you think this might play out in terms of budget discussions and some of the things that you might believe would be happening next. So I'll lay that out there.
I'd be happy to begin if it's okay, Janet. And so good morning, everyone. So to your question, I think what you just a moment ago said about the administration maybe planning in terms of contingency planning, perhaps seems very realistic to me. I mean, it's realistic to think that there might not be a global resolution of the FY16 budget in this fiscal year, and that with consent decrees, with continuing appropriations, with the education budget having been signed for elementary and secondary education. As you all know, big chunks of the budget are in fact being spent. And so it's not balanced, it's not complete. And this impasse, I think, will continue for some time. It seems to me that we will be moving in rather soon to the FY17 budget discussion, and it's just going to be overlaid on top of the incompleteness of the one before. And what's the timing of getting FY17 done? That's an open question as well. And I think what we may see is some piecemeal appropriating by crisis. I'll stop there so the others can weigh in.
Yeah.
I completely agree with that. I would say that nobody really expects there to be any solution put forward before the March primary, which is on March 15th. And so really, when you think about the fact that it takes 60 votes in the House, 30 in the Senate to pass something right now, the window for an agreement realistically is probably between March and May, that they could do something that was kind of global. If they go into another overtime and haven't come up with a global solution, I think, we're just going to continue to see crisis budgeting as Rob indicated. And I think that's part of the reason why a lot of the stuff we do at the grassroots level is so important is, we've seen, a series of smaller budget pieces of budget making over the course of this crisis that have arisen as crises come to a head. And a lot of what drives that is increased awareness at the grassroots level that brings pressure to bear on legislators that have been standing on one side of the issue or the other of the stalemate. And then then that kind of bubbles to the surface, and it kind of creates a situation where there's going to be legislation put on the floor and passed. And so, as bleak as the situation can sound, there's a lot of room for us to impact those discussions by staying engaged at the local level.
I would say that I think from the administration's perspective, they would agree with your outlook, Janet. And that the sense that I get from them is that there's no interest from the Democratic side in doing a deal. I think the Democrats would say the same thing about the Republicans. And that they are working under the assumption that there will be, as Mike and Rob and Janet were all saying, there will be, as pressures become unbearable, there will be some small segment related to that pressure that gets addressed somehow. Whether any of it's legal or whatever is a question that remains, but it is the reality that we're living in. And I think I had discussions yesterday. I think the consent decree statement that came from the administration about, there was reporting that the administration was going to try to get out from under consent decrees. And I said, I asked, what is it that you mean by that? And it's an example of lack of clear communication, I think, because what they mean is they understand there are a reason that the consent decrees are there. They understand the way to get out from under them is to satisfy them. So they don't have some nefarious plan to try to undercut that somehow. What they were intending to say was they're understanding they don't want to get into further consent decrees because of the disasters, that are happening on a daily basis these days. They're trying to figure out ways to address some pressures before they find themselves in another consent decree situation. So in a way, that's good news, because a lot of the funding that you guys are getting on a daily basis is through that process. And there's absolutely no intention for them to try to avoid that or undercut that.
Yeah, and I echo and agree with what's said here. I mean, the way I try to help people, because I do not think at this point the odds of us seeing, this may be the first time we have a year where there is no budget. 17, he's going to do his budget address here shortly. The budget office has worked on a budget, even though that seems absurd that they're going to have a 17 when there's nothing to build off of 16. But when I try to explain to people, I explain it's like World War I trench warfare. You have two sides that are dug in, and we're stuck in the middle of no man's land where all the shells are landing and all the bullets are flying. And instead of, in ages past, you'd have budgeteers. We've had budget committees. We've had different approaches. There's always some sort of what I would equate to diplomacy going on behind the scenes. That's not really happening now. And so without diplomacy, you have to have some way to overcome somebody. And that seems everybody's investing their time to find how do you overcome the stalemate and come up with a tank that can roll through no man's land to smash the guy in his other trenches. I mean, that seems to be the approach, is to overcome the other guy's entrenchment, not to find a diplomatic solution. And until there's something that causes that to happen, but we've seen a lot of bad things happen already over this period of time without a budget, and nothing has seemed to move one side or the other to blink. And, you know, I want to be happy and positive, but I really don't see how anything changes between now and May 31st for a deal to come about.
So it seems to me, and it's my perspective as well, that we're not likely to see a different dynamic play out as these discussions go forward. They're going to be one side that has their agenda and the other side that has theirs. And as you just mentioned, Matt, not a lot of diplomacy that's leading to compromise, although that's not to say it's not possible that there would be compromise on some of those things, but not likely. So in the first year that we went through this, I mean, one of the things we talked about was, oh my gosh, we've never been here before. We don't really know how to operate in this environment, and we don't know really how to advocate in this environment. But we've now been through a full year of it. And so I don't think it serves us well to say, oh my gosh, we've never been here before. So from your perspectives, how should we be approaching this as we go into, as I mentioned, not just what we have in terms of our legislative priorities that cost money. And I feel no need to apologize for the fact that we're coming forward with an agenda that costs money. So that, plus one that is somewhat complex in that there are a lot of pieces of our agendas that are, I guess there are a lot of pieces in addition to costing money that would require action or changes in action as the state begins to deliver these services under new federal statute and regulation and that sort of thing. So wow, that was really long. That was august. But the question that I have is, what do we need to be doing as we go into these negotiations to best represent what we want to see happen?
So if I may start, the big difference that I would my observation would be is that in this environment, unlike in other years where you have maybe more bipartisanship, maybe the ability to work both sides and come to some agreement, where you're working multiple issues, you've got an agenda that consists of several items you really want to accomplish. In this environment, how do you cut through the clutter is really the question of all the war that's being waged. So I think it's important to answer that question then, is to focus on what is most important. And during this period of time where there is the impasse continuing and will go on for some time, it's important to get that message, which is DSP and mental health reform. But I'm really focusing on DSP, I guess, in my mind here. Get that to be burned in, just like political messaging. It's got to be burned in so that when a legislator thinks about IARF and its members and your issues and the broader community and their issues, what they think about is DSP. That's what we want. We want them to link the two, and that's the issue for that community when we talk about human services. So that's the objective. The grassroots and all the advocacy you're doing then is the route there. And I'll stop short there and let others comment.
I agree with that. And in terms of, talking about the general way forward, we've been working on an action plan for the DSP issue that I'm sure Josh and Cyrus will be rolling out here soon. But one of the key parts of it is starting to be a lot more targeted and focused in where we put our efforts. We know there are certain legislators that are strong supporters. We know there are certain legislators that we're not going to be able to get. So let's first be smart about where we're investing our time, money, and resources by targeting the right legislators and really honing in on them for some serious efforts toward educating them about the issue, why it's important, and and beyond that, also educating the broader community. Excuse me, I thought I turned that off. Right. But educating the broader community, because a lot of your broader community outside of the people in this room don't even really fully understand the work it is that gets done. And so it's hard to kind of get that sense of grassroots momentum if you haven't done the work of making sure everybody knows that you're not just another greedy group coming out for handout, but that you actually have a real benefit and value to the community that goes beyond the things they don't see, and kind of enlist them into your efforts. And that goes to work at building local coalitions around the need to raise DSP wages and bring in other people that you work with, from vendors to, people that help fund you and all that stuff. We need to be doing more stuff at that local level in the right areas with the right focus to really kind of put the pressure on legislators from down below.
Yeah, I think it might be counterintuitive to think that in the midst of all this disaster and, debt that the state owes its vendors, et cetera, it might be counterintuitive to think that you should go ask for a big increase. And on the other hand, if you step back and look at, okay, what's going on in Illinois? It's a series of structural problems that they have: pensions, with infrastructure, with healthcare, with human services, with education. And so if you're not bold, reasonable, but bold with your ask, you've really missed the opportunity to be equally considered when there is a resolution. So even though it seems a little strange to be going at this, asking for a big increase, actually it fits right in with what the message is all across the state. And if you don't do it, you've really missed a chance. And that's why I think Janet and the staff here and you guys all have done a very good job of deciding, okay, we're going to focus on what we really need despite all the other stuff going on. So I would say well done and keep at it.
Yeah, I would, if there's ever a time to be, I say, I hate using the word aggressive, but maybe the word being a pest. Look, there's rooms all over the state with all sorts of issues having these same kind of conversations right now, and they're all going to legislators and talking to them. And you almost have to, when they're hearing all those different messages and all those other problems that are just as real, you can't let them forget you. And it means you need to talk to them as often as possible. The message needs to get out there. This is the problem. This is what we see as the solution, because once you're gone, 10 minutes later, they have another meeting with somebody coming in talking about another. And, I really think, I hate being a pest, but sometimes that's what you have to do, because the 10 people that come in the room after you, they're going to, at the end of the day, it's hard for them to remember all this stuff. And, I think of a legislator as like my kids. You got to tell them more than once. And it's not anything bad about a legislator. It's just you're coming in, you're bombarded with 10, 20 issues a day. And in this environment, it's worse than ever, because there's hundreds of different issues out there. And again, there are rooms just like this talking about it and how to get out there. You have to be, you just can't let up. You have to be a pest and be aggressive, because it's easy for the next guy to come in and they forget 50% of what you said to them. And again, nothing bad about it's just that's just humanity. You just get overwhelmed at some point. So you have to be out there consistently over and over with that message. And it's important to be consistent in it, but repetitive over and over again to as many people that you can get listened to, whether it's legislators, their staffs, whoever your local leaders. A lot of the legislators will talk to their local mayors, their local county people, whoever they may be. You need to get that embedded in so at some point they see you and they know they can say back to you what that story is. You have to be a pest in this environment.
I just want to add one other thing, and a lot of what's happened over this past year, in terms of where the stalemate is, we hear a lot about the turnaround agenda. And something that I thought was pretty interesting happened earlier this week when Senate President Cullerton gave a speech in Chicago before the City Club, and he highlighted education reform as the defining issue of this moment, and talked about 20 years of neglect. But one of the things he said was, this is our turnaround agenda. So the governor's talked about his turnaround agenda, and now the Senate president made a pivot of saying, well, here's an issue, this is our turnaround agenda. When you look at the industry that you all work in, you've been subject to, neglect for over a decade. That, it's not the type of thing that's an easy lift, just like education funding reform or anything else. But it's definitely an issue that needs to be turned around. And as the debate potentially expands into, other pieces of the budget, whether it's pension reform, education reform, we need to also be driving home the point that, this should be part of the turnaround agenda. This is part of what makes Illinois a better place, is having a robust, strong system of a social safety net. And we've been ignoring it, and it's to the state's peril. And so it needs to be turned around as well.
Yeah, I will use, I have one more question and then we'll open it up. I would use the part of our agenda around mental health reform to frame the next question. I mean, there are some very aggressive goals that we have as components of that mental health reform, all of them needed, all of them having been neglected, for like we talked about, both financially and programmatically. But it seems to be an area where there is bipartisan awareness of what is beginning to happen with the deterioration of the mental health kind of safety net, as we've been characterizing it, across not just Illinois, but across the country. So in your opinions, are there areas of agendas like ours where we're likely to see bipartisan work to get something done, I guess, as long as it doesn't fall into those categories of where the administration or where the leaders are saying, no, this is, outside of that. But are there opportunities in your estimation for us to advance those kinds of things?
Well, I would answer yes to that, and that's the way it has to happen. It has to happen through the legislators, both sides of the aisle, as it should. That they all represent communities where your clients are, in their districts, you're in their districts. It's not a winners and losers thing in terms of some districts benefiting more or less than others. I mean, it's across the board. So it's certainly, it ought to be and must be bipartisan.
I would agree with that. I think that, interestingly, legislators feel, it's not surprising, they feel a lot of pressure from organizations like yours and all the others that Matt was talking about. And so they're looking for ways to work on issues in a positive, constructive way that ultimately, hopefully, get resolved in a bigger resolution of the bigger questions. So there's a need for them to work on things. They want to be doing something constructive. They've been working bipartisanly on a lot of things behind the scenes, and it's very important that your issues are part of that. So yes, I would say absolutely.
I don't have a lot more to add. I mean, but the worst thing that could happen is for our issues to become somehow become a partisan issue. The only way you move forward with the issues that are important as ours is support from both sides of the aisle. And so no matter what we're doing, whether it's grassroots here in Springfield, how we communicate, we've always got to be very careful to make it clear that, we're not picking a partisan side. The only side we're on is, our facilities, our clients, families we serve.
Yeah, in the end, I mean, whenever we have a budget, whenever there's a deal made and there's some sort of big bill that puts all the policy changes together that get done, I mean, I can't see us getting away from where there's going to be a table where there's the governor's office and representatives from each chamber from each party, and, the typical budgeteer. And when that table finally gets there, you want members from each side, everybody, all five of them saying, you know what, we need to do something with this. It's got to be bipartisan, and that's why you got to keep pounding on it, because that's when that table actually gets going. You want to all of them say, oh yeah, this needs to get done, and that's your opportunity. If it becomes partisan and one side or the other is only bringing it up, that's where things get lost.
Okay, I'm going to open it up to question, but I'm going to ask each of you I'll reserve the last 2 minutes for each of you to give, what do you think we're going to hear today?
Words of wisdom, is that our best guesses?
That's right. Or something that we can, a positive takeaway that we can look forward to in the governor's state of the state. Yeah.
That's-
As if the challenge wasn't hard enough, you know, I've added that.
Gosh, I hope we don't run out of time for that.
Questions?
So I will open it up to all of you if you have questions for the panel. Yeah, Bill.
With respect to what you've just been talking about here, about messaging and partisanship, on the mental health side, if we talk about system reform, the things that we want as our agenda, would it be, do you think it'd be of value to latch onto the term turnaround agenda? Or would that be, that could look one-sided and connotate negativity into the governor?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we want to be careful about that. I mean, when I mentioned that earlier, it was more along the lines of, the idea that there are more issues that need to be addressed, in a global sense than just what one side is saying. And if we can drive that message home, and we're already seeing the other side to try to adopt some of those tactics, we should be opportunistic, but I don't think we want to adopt the messaging of one side or the other.
Agreed.
Agreed.
Carl?
So how do we get bipartisan support? I don't think I've ever seen somebody, a Democrat or a Republican, break ranks for us.
Let me ask you to clarify. Are you talking budget-wise or are you talking substantive issues?
I'll do both.
Okay.
I mean,
I have a response. I don't know how good it will be, but so there are a number of informal working groups going on amongst the legislators in the General Assembly. And while they're not going to be, it would be my best prediction, they're not going to be able at this point to move anything forward ahead of a broader resolution that the leadership has bought into. I do think it's worth starting with a core group of legislators in each of the 4 caucuses who have a particular interest in mental health and or developmental disability services, and really working through with them the details of your agenda, why, how, and that sort of thing, because, and then broadening that group over time, over these, over this informal process time, so that once there is an opportunity, the groundwork is laid. You've got a very well-educated core in both, in all 4 caucuses, and people who can advocate for you in a very informed and effective way.
have we done that?
Pardon?
Have we done that?
I think we
Yeah,
will
I
be.
think I think we've identified kind of who we start with. Mike was saying earlier that it was, there are people who traditionally have been in our camp, and of course we don't want to ignore them because they really are our champions. But we have to go beyond that to broaden the circle. And in some caucuses, we have stronger support than in others. And so we'll have to make sure where we invest our time and energy for a good outcome.
So our members know who's in that caucus and we try to push that agenda. So if we haven't been contacted, then my local people are not part of that.
Well, I think the majority of our contact with legislators has not been focused in the way we're talking about doing in the DSP. We've been much more global. People know what we're interested in, and we're not, fainting more toward one side versus the other. I think, and I think that to the extent that we narrow our efforts moving forward, it'll still be a very bipartisan push. I think, part of the issue here is I think there's plenty of support or plenty of support from both sides of the aisle for a lot of the issues that we care about, including the budget issues. The problem is that in the broader sense, there's tremendous partisan pressure on both sides to toe the line with the party. And we are one of a whole lot of groups that are pressuring them right now. And really, we haven't seen much breaking yet at this point. Now, I can't say it's going to be our issue that causes a break. It may not be any specific issue. It may be there's finally agreement at the top between the legislative leaders and the governor. But I don't think that means we don't need to continue keeping up that pressure in the way we have.
Yeah, and I would say, Carl, that to your point about if we haven't been contacted, we don't need to be reaching out. I think it's early, and that strategy that's a part of the GR committee discussions is formalizing, and so people will be. But I think everybody's going to have to lift on this. And the other thing that I will tell you is, in the past, it's been the responsibility has been placed on the CEOs and the program director levels oftentimes. And we have had some advocacy on the part of like DSPs when we've gone for wage increases in the past. But on that particular issue, families, direct support professionals, and individuals that are supported by them are going to be key in this strategy as we go forward. So the role of the CEO may shift from being in Springfield once a week to having weekly meetings with some core group of your staff that are kind of filtering that out and getting broader participation in it. So it's coming together now, and soon everybody will be engaged and involved. Dale and then Greg.
I think with that, I think we also need to have a more specific strategy for the governor's office. We can't just assume he's Mr. No and yes. I think we've got to really do a greater effort of bringing DSPS, not just through the secretary, but how we get that message, whether that's the grassroots and sooner than later. So it's not just, okay, I gave on that one, it's there, but we can either take the approach that it's hopeless and at the end we hope we negotiate out to become the one, or we really try to turn this guy on our issue, or at least make sure it's in the front of his mind and not just getting rid of the consent decree,
Right.
but that we are the issue that is important. And I think we've got to spend more time on that, even instead of just giving it up.
I think it's a good point. Greg?
I think we've done, over the years, we've done a horrible job of doing a great job. It's the best way I can say it. We figured out how to stay alive, most of it. And we've not done a very good job of talking about and touting the closures and the upsizings, if you will. And I think maybe we need to spend some time in the short term gathering the data and talking about the fact that 40% of the ICFPDs in the state have closed in the last 5 years. And talking about the mental health programs that have shut down in the last 24 months now. And talking about the fact that we did a survey on the 31st of January, and we found out that there are 4,682 open DSP jobs that we can't get anybody to apply for. And so at what point in time does the Illinois legislature think that this is going to cave in on them in a big way? We need to talk about the fact that how many 2, 3, and 4 bed villas have now been upsized to 6 and 8 bed,
Yeah.
which is going exactly the wrong way of what we've been trying to do in this state for a long time. But it's what we've all had to do to survive.
I would add to that when you make those points, it's really important that you explain what that means, because legislators, the governor's office, everybody's hearing this is closed and that's closed. But for many people, particularly the folks in the Capitol building, what does that mean in terms of impact? They're not personally impacted by it. They don't understand what that means. And so being specific about, that means 12 people are not getting service and that causes these 12 problems, or, being very specific about why that matters is important. Because we were talking a lot about the messages. It's hard to get through the clutter. They're hearing so many crisis messages that you need to really give a specific impact in order to get through the urgency of the problem.
Yeah, I would just add to that briefly or emphasize what she's saying is that, I spent 13 years in the state government, and the pressures now are worse than they were. Well, they're different. I don't know if they're necessarily worse in some cases, but the problem is, and this is not, there's a lot of good people in state government. I have high respect for state workers. There's a lot of good ones. There's always some bad ones. But at some point with those pressures, it's unfortunate that things become numbers.
Exactly.
And they lose touch with what's going on out in the real world. I mean, they lose touch with the people that you are actually serving because it becomes a budget number. All things about policy come back to being a budget number, and the pressure is on them to find a number. And when things become numbers, it loses. Yeah, you tell me something's closed or you've upsized the SILA, the emotional impact and connection is not there. And so that's why it's important to keep telling that story in that way, because they've got to, that switch has got to flip back on, that they see, oh, this is affecting real people. This is more than a number. So it's, again, not meant to be an indictment on state workers. It's just because that pressure and dealing with all those things, it just, those things become numbers at some point. You got lots of
A couple of things and 2 questions. One of my first notes when I sat down here and started listening to you, the first thing I said is better grassroots effort. And the idea would be a letter, regular letters to their legislators and NQ legislators and department heads and committee and appropriation heads that are identified as potential or friendly. And a letter from the CEOs and a letter from agency personnel with a personal story of how cuts and lack of money makes a difference. If those letters come regularly to those identified legislators, they can put a face to it, they can put a name to it. It becomes more personal to them. And
I can tell you that's a very big part of what we're building into this DSP grassroots plan, because you know, in my past experience and also in the experience with this, if you can't make that emotional connection, you're just one of a list that are asking. But you know, everybody in this room has an amazing story to tell, and you work with people who have amazing stories to tell. But if you guys aren't the ones telling it, nobody's going to do it for you. And so,
they'll hear it from you, but
yeah, I mean, Rob and Jennifer can tell that to any legislator, but it doesn't mean the same as if you walk into their district office and sit down with a family member or client and let them know what the impact of this program has had on my family, and if this closes, what it's going to mean. That's extremely important. And it's not just important in terms of talking to the General Assembly, although it is, but it's also important in educating your community. And that's why part of what we're going to be talking about is going into editorial boards nearby and taking family members with you so that the editorial boards get the hang of it and they talk about it. You know, doing certain press activities to kind of raise the profile or other types of media things, because you need everybody to understand that you guys aren't just, I mean, there's a tendency out there, I think, in the general public to think when somebody's asking for money, well, they're whining, government's too big and all that stuff. But when people actually connect emotionally with what the actual activity is that's taking place, well, then it becomes different. And that's where a lot of the effort needs to be at the grassroots, I think.
You had a couple of questions?
yes, yeah. The crisis budgeting issue via court mandates, will that be constitutionally challenged at some point? Because they could go on, hopefully not through the next fiscal year, but how far do we go? Is this next September? Has any group said we're going to constitutionally question this? Because we've got a constitutional mandate for a balanced budget, yet we don't have a budget, and they're going to extend it again possibly.
I've not heard of any specific effort to do so. I would be surprised if ultimately that were successful, and that, because I think the courts are going to be reluctant to wade in and begin legislating. So that'll take a long time. And I think so.
And then the other one is, you talk about the bold ask for DSP funding. Does that bold ask also include some kind of efficiency management? Because like you said, it all does come down to numbers at the end.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tune the ask with efficiency increases? Because that's one of the keys that the governor wants to see.
Yeah, and we have advanced not only to the administration, but to a group of legislators that have traditionally been involved with the management improvement activities that have gone on, kind of the collection of ideas that we have advanced before, but we have advanced them again. So yes, that's a component of it.
So communication to the agencies with those exact ideas that could team with the letters and the stories and the examples to the local legislators and then committee heads would be really impactful.
Okay, thank you. All right, so
I have a question from Arlington Heights.
Josh, what?
Sorry, they were trying to get through to Arlington Heights. I got a question from someone up in Arlington.
Okay.
Heights. And the framing of this is the department has issued award letters for contracts for GRF grants to agencies that has sort of a guarantee written in them that they'll be paid, with interest when there's a budget approved. So say for programs like respite, in which, agencies have received award letters for but are not currently getting paid. If we get through the end of June and past, say, August, when the lapse period is, with no appropriation for those contracts, what does that mean for those agencies that have provided those services? I mean, do you have an idea about legal relief or anything like that? And what does that mean? It sucks. It's a difficult question because we've never even had to contemplate this before.
Actually, we just were talking about it yesterday. Not that we have an answer. My best answer would be, or this is where we landed, but we should pursue it more specifically with the administration and some legal analysis. But is that if you don't appropriate in the fiscal year, then you can't get paid for that fiscal year. But if there's a doubling of the budget in 17, maybe, then you get paid back as one option. But we really don't know. We were just asking ourselves that question yesterday.
I think in past years under Blagojevich, didn't they extend the lapse period for certain times? So,
They have,
say 5 or 6 months into fiscal 17, if they make a decision, they could always write into the budget implementation to a longer lapse period to grab everything that was missed.
I think it's safe to say that they would try to solve that problem, looking at a number of options.
Okay. Yep.
As part of a follow-up to Greg's comments, in addition to the vacancies, which obviously is a drain on state resources because people are unemployed and get benefits for that until they're exhausted, I'm wondering if in the information gathering, if there's data available to reflect the number of VSPs that are actually eligible for state benefits, that have kid care and a link card and stuff, because it's not even a living wage. So I just think that's another, they're working and relying on state benefits for their families. So that might be information that would be helpful to save money.
Yep, that's a great idea.
Some steps,
Okay.
or something.
Carl.
One more question.
Yeah.
This is from a parent, so I have comments for that. Do we have a recall mechanism in this state to recall the government?
Yes. But it's not a very realistic route. But it's not a very realistic route because even if you go through the petition process, there's also a requirement that be certified by a bipartisan group of members of the General Assembly. And it would be very doubtful that you would get any members of the governor's party to certify a recall petition effort. So technically, yes, but realistically, no.
Thank you.
Okay, so wrap up here with your positive
thoughts
about the state of the state.
Okay.
Come on, Rob.
You start, Rob.
Well, I'll go, yeah.
I guess that's only fair. I have been starting, so I will continue. So, I just think, look, it's a mess. We all know that. So what can you say? It's a mess. It has to be taken as an opportunity for us. It has to be to focus, to hone our message in one area. It's something that is going to take, I think, more than this year. We're looking at a multi-year process here, really, a crisis, a budgeting by crisis process, and so we just have to stay focused and.
When we survive this, you will have great war stories for the rest of time. I think that I would say, from a positive perspective, even though it appears as bleak and dismal as any of us have ever seen it, and none of us can predict how it's going to play out, the fact that a lot of people are still trying to make it, trying to fix things, working toward an ultimate resolution, however far down the road it is a positive. And to Rob's point, even though right now you're under extreme pressure, it's one of those transition times where you can take advantage of it to really move yourselves forward when it ends. So that's what I would say.
Well, I would say, even though everybody would agree we're in a time of complete chaos, Whether your providers that serve through SILAs, serve DD, people with developmental disabilities, if you're serving those with behavioral health needs, those real stories do come through. And when the pieces start coming back together again, you're still serving the neediest people in this state. And there are going to be some things that are going to fall to the side. But when people get down to it, and you're messaging and continually in front of these legislators, regardless of what side of the aisle, what chamber they're in, most of them deep down their heart want to help people. And as bad as it seems right now, as horrible as it seems like nobody's listening, I know that. It feels that way to me a lot. But there is an opportunity. I agree. There's an opportunity to come out of this chaos and hopefully have some real progress made, because with it falling apart like this, there are people willing to listen to do something different. That's the one thing I think a lot of people are saying. We need to do things differently on all levels, whether it's education or healthcare, whatever that may be. People are looking for different paths. That's why it's good that you're, whether it's the DSP issue or the mental health grant issue or such, you're not just saying this stinks, you need to fix it. You're bringing forth solutions, and people are desperate for solutions because they're not coming up with them on their own.
Always great to be the last person to go into the positive thought. But honestly, what I would say is that as unprecedented and unpredictable as this entire situation has been, the fact is that I think when the solution comes, it'll probably be equally unexpected and unpredictable, and there are when we were here, back at the end of session last year, nobody expected that this could possibly go on this long, because how can you possibly run state government like this? And the fact is you really can't. And, we've been limping along, but there's been a lot of indication, I think, since the first of the year that we've gone past the wheels coming off to parts of the body and the engine kind of dropping out and all that stuff. But I think you're seeing a lot of that happening all at once. Whereas for the last 6 months, it's been like one thing pops up and then they deal with it. We're seeing news about what's happening with Lutheran Social Services, at the same as we're hearing about Chicago State University and Eastern Illinois University and all these other things that are all kind of starting to steamroll. And I would hope that at a certain point they realize that they've got to bring this to some sort of conclusion. But I'm trying to be an optimist here. What I would say in terms of going forward is, once we're at the end of this, not only are we going to have great war stories, but we're going to have one heck of a grassroots operation that's going to serve you really well going into the future. And that alone is a good reason to focus on all that work that we're going to be doing this year. So.
Well, if you had a question or you think of a question that you weren't able to bring up, please get those to Cyrus, and we will pose them to our panelists and then put those things back out so that everybody has a chance for their question to be asked and hopefully answered. But with that, I want to thank all of these individuals that are here with me. It is, I've heard people say that they've been asked to look in their crystal ball, and these days it's more of a snow globe. And I think that that's a very accurate description, and it's a very difficult time for people who traditionally have been very assured of how to direct us through this, to be asking us to know that we're going to have to be stepping aside and going in this direction and then stepping aside and going in that one. But nonetheless, we very much appreciate all the time that you spend with us and all of the advice that you give to us. So if we could thank them, that'd be great. So we'll move to committees up on the third floor, the DD committee in the director's room and the behavioral health committee in the boardroom. And thanks, everybody.
Yeah, now.
Jan, do you want to turn this off?
Yeah. Actually, yeah.